Hi. In this series, I'm going to be trying to recreate the Super Mario Brothers classic game. Um, I'm going to be doing it in XNA, which is the engine that Microsoft's Xbox Arcade uses. It will take. Don't expect to be able to just port this game over to the Xbox, but learning the engine is definitely the first step to creating games for the Xbox Live Arcade. Um, so the first thing I wanted to do is, and the first thing you really should do before starting any major project, I'm going to plan out my game, and by that I mean plan out how my classes are going to be structured and basically how everything is going to be organized. I found this really cool website the other day called Gliffy.com, and that's what I'm going to be using to plan out my Mario game, and hopefully you can kind of get a feel for how this website works. So the URL is Gliffy.com, and you can do the try it now for free, or you can go. I think you go here. Uh, yeah, here. And then here you can create a free account, which is that's actually what I'm using right now because I just started messing with it. The actual one isn't too pricey, but so anyways, let me log in, and it uses HTML5, I believe, for this cool little interface thing, and so far it's been pretty easy to use. So I'm gonna click create document here, and I'm just gonna make a blank one. Okay, so this is what you are started with. The first thing I want to do when you create a game in XNA, it creates a default class for you, which basically just handles all of the different life cycles of your game, and I'll show you that in a bit here. But so the first thing I want to do to get started planning this out is I'm just gonna create a block for my main class, and then so what I've been doing, messing with this a little bit. I don't really like any of the other shapes besides squares and circles. So I'm using the my square my squares for big classes, such as the main class or managers, things of that nature. So I can kind of look at it and visually recognize what is what. Um, I'm just holding spacebar here. If you hold spacebar and left click and pan, you can move the view around. Okay, so the first thing that I want to plan out, um, which this is really for you. I do this particular class with almost every game I make, but I need to have some way of loading textures and accessing those textures later throughout the game. Uh, Pretty much every class you can imagine in a game is going to be needing some sort of texture or playing sounds or something. So what I like to create when I make games, almost the first thing I do is I create what I call a content manager. Now I'm going to make this bigger because it's a pretty important part of my apps usually. Um, and notice I'm not connecting these on purpose because when I create a content manager, there are other ways to do this, but this is just always the way that I've done it. I like to make it what's called a singleton class, and I'll kind of explain more what that does later. But I'm just gonna do this just to remind myself that that's what that is. Okay, now under this content manager class, I need it to load a couple different things. For now, I'm only gonna do two, but so the first thing I need to load and keep track of is textures. So because obviously that's what a content manager class should do. And then the next thing I want it to do is keep track of my sounds. And then that will also be background music too, because they're really the same thing. Okay, and now if I want to connect these, I click this button, or also you can hit Control Shift 3, and then I'm just going to click and drag, and then click and drag, and then you can hit Escape to go back to the regular mouse, or you can click this. Okay, so that's really all I need for now for my content manager. That's good enough. So I'm going to start working on this main class here, on basically just creating the main layout for my game. So what most people will do, and what I'm going to do in XNA, is they will create a scene manager class. So that's what I'm going to do here. Will be, so basically this will keep track of what is actually being shown on the screen at the moment. So let's go ahead and connect this here. I'm OCD, so I'm going to make that line up perfectly. Okay, so under the ScreenManager class, the first thing that we want to have under here, we're going to have a MenuScreen, and that's pretty obvious what that's going to do. And then also we're going to have, let's put that here, game screen. And there may be more later, but for now this will cover it. Really, this isn't super important because this kind of thing is not something that's going to change really. It's not going to be that, it's not that complicated. If you have a different screen, something else that's going to show on the screen, then you create a different class for it. For other parts of the programming process, laying it out like this is very helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and connect these to there. I think it's really cool how it automatically sets the lines to bend in a clean looking way. Okay, now in my game screen, which is basically just going to be the class that takes care of the game, I could put all the logic for the game in this particular class, but what I'll actually end up doing, and I'll actually go ahead and show this. Maybe I should use a different, we'll use this octagon. So this is going to be this is going to be a class type, and that's just going to be called screen. And screen, see if I can, no I can't. I can make this smaller though, make it fit in there. Screen is going to be the class that game screen and menu screen is derived from. And if you have any experience with object-oriented programming, then you'll kind of understand that. If not, don't worry, I will attempt to explain that later. Let's see, how do I want to show this? So I can do this, and then, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do it like this. Yeah. And then you can just hit delete on that and get rid of the line. I wonder if there's a way to change a color of things. I don't really know how to do that, but that would be helpful here. I don't know. Yeah, I really don't know how to do that, so maybe there's not a way to do that. Okay, whatever. So those two classes are derived from my screen class, so I don't really want to put all the game logic in here because it's not, it will be hard to follow later. If that's confusing, I'm sorry. I just kind of take my word on it, because really when you're doing object-oriented programming, the more you can split stuff up and it still be logical, the easier it will be to follow later on when you come back and look at it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a game manager class. And this is basically going to be the only thing that's inside the game screen. Basically, the game screen is going to have its own draw function, which will be where we draw everything to the screen. And the game manager class, which is going to be inside the game screen class, is going to handle all of the drawing. So that's really going to be, we'll have our draw function in here, and then basically we're going to have game manager draw, and then it will take care of all of that. And it'll be very easy to look at. So let me just connect this here. Okay. Now, under the game manager, we are going to need that in Mario. There's going to be a couple different things that we need to take care of. Obviously, all of the enemies and your player, which in games those are usually referred to as entities. So that's what the things that are going to be moving around and that will have AI. So we will call this our entity manager. Put this over here. And let's see. I have a off screen. I have one that I've already kind of drawn so I don't get lost. Let me connect this. And then under that, we will put our player, which will be Mario. And we will also have enemies, because enemies are very important in Mario. It would be pretty simple without them. Go ahead and connect that. And then I'll worry more about enemies later, but the player part's going to be kind of important. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of plan out the different things that we'll need. Obviously, we'll need lives, because that's a separate variable that your player has that needs to be kept track of. Coins needs to be kept track of. And I will call this current power up. So basically, the power up is just going to be, there are the different power ups that Mario can pick up. I can't remember what they're called. I haven't actually played Mario in a long time. But there's the one that makes him fly with the tail thing, and then there's the flower that gives him the little fireballs that he can throw. And so we need to keep track of that to make sure that stays in order. So I'm gonna connect this. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so that should actually do it for our entity manager. The next thing that we need to look at, there has to be a way for us to actually load the levels. And so you probably guess what I'm going to call this. It's going to be called the level manager. And I'm going to make this big too, because this has kind of a lot of stuff off of it. Not that big. Right there. Okay. And then I'm going to connect that guy right there. Okay. Under the level manager, I'll go ahead and put some variables that are going to be in here. The first one I'm just going to call castle. Well, actually, that should really be the second one, but and basically the castle, that's the end of it. And then that'll also, I think I may. No, yeah, I'll put the. No, yeah, that'll be together, because the castle is always right behind the flag. So you'll set in the level manager, which is basically going to load files that we're going to create that have all the information about that particular level. It'll say where the castle is going to be, which is basically telling where the flag and the end of the level is, and then it will know that's where you put the flag, and then a little bit over you'll have the castle. So that's important to note. And then also where the player actually starts. Which really these things are probably mostly going to be pretty much the same. It'll be the castle is going to be the end of the map, and the player start is going to be the beginning of the map. So it's pretty straightforward, but I want to go ahead and put that in there. Okay, and then so I'm going to go ahead and look at go to Google Images, and I'm going to look up. Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to look up Super Mario Brothers. Why does that look so weird? Sorry about that. Super Mario Brothers, and then this will work. Okay, so if you notice this, the ground here, that's one picture tiled over and over again. Same with pretty much everything. So what we're going to be loading, which is what the level files are going to store, are basically just definitions for tiles. So that will have that basically be an array, and then it will load all of the tiles into it, and then what's going to happen is the level manager will render the tiles, and will tell the game manager to render the tiles, and then the game manager will tell the game screen to render that, and so on. Game screen tells the scene manager to tell the main class, which then actually draws the tiles to the screen. Okay, so other things that the level manager is going to handle. Pipes. Pipes are kind of important. They're unique in that they teleport the player sometimes, so that's something that needs to be separate. Breakable tiles is going to be things like these things like the question marks and stuff, and then we'll have some settings, some variables in there that define exactly how those react. The next thing is platforms, which I don't think those are shown in these. If you've played Super Mario Brothers lately, there's levels where there's little platforms that move up and down, and those are very unique as well. So we want to store them in their own. Let's make this more symmetrical. We want to store them in their own class. Okay, now I'm just going to connect this. So you can actually do, if you wanted to, you can do, you can kind of put them wherever you want, which is helpful. I like putting them on the things that are already there, just because when you do that, you can actually move it around, and it stays in place, which is nice. Because you end up moving it around, moving your stuff around a lot, just to organize stuff better. And I think this actually will do it. I think this is enough to get started on. This little navigator is pretty useful. You can kind of click and drag around and look at it. Okay. Excuse me. So now I'll get started actually programming. I spent a lot of time on just planning out the thing as you should. So I won't do a whole lot of the actual programming in this video, but I will start. Okay, so the first thing I'm using Visual Studio Professional. I get it for free because I'm a student, but you can also just use the C# Express. And then you need to download XNA Studio. I'm using version 4, so you should. That's the newest one, so you should probably use that one too. If you're using Windows 8, as I am, there is a weird little problem with installing XNA. As an easy fix, all you have to do is download oh, what's it called? Yeah, go to Windows Live Games, the games for Windows client. If you all you have to do is download that and install that first, and then when you install XNA, it will install perfectly fine. I knew at one point why that was the case. I don't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, I don't know why it does that, but it will fail in Windows 8 unless you have the games for Windows client installed. So anyways, I'm gonna hit new project here, and Windows Game 4, and then I'm gonna do, we'll call this Super Mario clone, and I'm gonna hit OK. And it's going to create my project for me. So this is what you get presented with at the start. It looks like a lot. I don't really like all of the comments that they put in here. It's kind of hard to read. But basically, you have your important ones here are your load content. That's where all of your textures and everything will be loaded. Unload is where you unload everything, obviously. Update is where you will handle any actual game logic. This is basically anything that needs to be done per frame will be done here. And then you have this nice game time variable that you can get elapsed game time, which will give you, and then you can get hours, milliseconds, minutes, how long you've been playing it, which is very useful if you have things that need to be independent of the frame rate. You can basically, what you do is you multiply it by the milliseconds that have passed and since the last frame, and then that will give you that will make your game more it will run uniformly even if the frame rate is not uniform, which happens a lot on, especially if it's an older computer. And then this function, the draw function, this is where everything is actually drawn to the game. So the first thing I'm going to create is actually the content manager, because that's going to be used in a lot of things. So what I like to do is I like to come here and then do a new folder, and I call it managers, because it makes it easier to organize everything. And then I'll do a new class, and this is going to be called Content Manager. Okay. Now this is the class that's going to be a singleton. So basically, first I'm going to create, I can do a more basic programming, C# programming tutorial if anybody needs it, but this is basically a constructor, so I'm going to kind of assume that you have some knowledge of programming. Now actually, we don't want people to be able to access the constructor from this way, because we don't want to have multiple instances of the content manager. So I'm going to set this to private, and then what we will have is a static function. No. And it's going to return a content manager, an instance of the content manager. And then I'm going to call it get instance. Okay, so what we're going to do, it's getting mad at me because it's not returning. I don't have a return value, and I'm telling it needs to return a content manager. So what we want to create here, and I also am going to make this private because I don't want people accessing this variable either. And now I'm going to write this, and then I'll kind of explain what it does. Okay. So this variable is static, and this function is static, which basically means that it doesn't change it, and you can access it from outside, even if you don't have a normal class. See, normally what you'd have to do is you'd have to say something along the lines of, you'd have to say content manager equals new content manager, that kind of thing. And then you'd say cm dot, and then you do your stuff. But since those are static, what we can do is just content manager. Shit. Maybe it's because using I apologize. Hold on. 1 second. Why is that not working? Oh, that's why. Okay, don't call that content manager because there is a content manager already in XNA. I actually don't know how that works, but I'm just gonna put an underscore. Okay. Okay. So since that, what this will do right here, when I call ContentManager.get instance, it takes this instance variable. If it's null, which means it hasn't been set to anything, it says instance equals new content manager. And since this function is inside the content manager class, it can call the constructor. And outside of this class, you can't call it because the constructor is private. But inside you can, and then it returns that instance. So what that does, if you call it again, instance is not null because instance has already been set previously. It returns this same content manager. So every time I call ContentManager.get instance, it returns the exact same instance of the content manager, which basically will let us use the content manager anywhere in our program without having to pass around a reference, which is useful. You don't want to use singletons all over the place because it can get kind of sloppy. But I know for a fact that I'm only going to need one content manager, and so it will work just fine for this. Okay. So in our content manager, we need it to hold textures and sounds. I'm going to actually use a dictionary for to store all the textures. Dictionaries let you, it's like an array, but instead of giving it an index, a number as the key, you can make it a string or really anything. So it ends up working really well for this particular thing. So I'll have, and I'm gonna actually I'm trying to type and talk at the same time. I'm gonna make this public, and then so it's just gonna be accessible straight through the variable. And it's going to have, the key is going to be a string, and I want the value to be a texture 2D, which I think you can, let's see. Yeah, you can do that. Okay, this is what I need. But I also need you need specific frameworks when you use stuff from XNA. So most of the time in most of the classes, you're going to at least need this one here. Why is this getting mad at me? Member modifier private must precede the member type and name. I don't know why why that's getting mad at me. Oh, this way. Okay, so we have this dictionary that stores our texture 2Ds, and the key is a string. So this is just going to be called textures, like that. And we have to instantiate our dictionary, or initiate. I forget which is the right word. I should know that, but so textures equals new dictionary, and then that's fine. I don't quite understand what the difference is, the string with a capital S with a lower s, but they do exactly the same thing. So there's our textures dictionary, and then I'm not going to worry about the sound one yet. I'll add that in later. So now we're going to have a load textures. And now what we need to load the textures is the content is, what's it called? We need this content, yeah, and content is that's the content manager, right? Okay. No wonder that didn't work before. Okay, so we actually need to pass the content manager, not that one. That's this. We need the regular content manager. And then you right click on this, resolve. We need that. Okay. So this is where all of our textures that we're going to need are going to go. So I'm actually going to load just a placeholder Mario. Let's see, what would be a good one? Oh, those are. I'm not sure. I haven't decided yet which version of Mario I'm going to do. I think probably this one, because I like this version. Oh, and that's not there. Let's redefine my search a little bit. We'll just use this one. And let me save this. Put this in. So when I should have Super Mario clone. I'm gonna go ahead and just put it in here, because this is where it's gonna end up going anyways. Yeah, in here. I don't want it to be, I guess it'll be a GIF. Okay, I think I'm actually going to need, I actually just reinstalled Windows on here, so I'm not positive I actually have anything to edit that, because I just need one little piece. Guess I just use Paint, that'll work. So give me a moment here. Super Mario, and then we have this here. So I'm gonna edit. Let's see what that's gonna open with. Okay. Yeah, and I just need like one frame of him for a placeholder. Okay. And save that as Mario Sprite. Save it, no, not TIFF, PNG. Okay. So we actually have to add this to the content class that that it creates, or this content project that it creates. Now that that's in there, we can actually load it. So I'm going to make a little helper file, or a little helper method, I mean, to add textures to my dictionary. We'll do, this will be the file name, and then we'll have an optional name. And I'm going to say, well, texture 2D, and that's going to be, to load it, I have to do, let's do it like this. I'm going to have ContentManager, call it CM, and then when this gets called, CM is going to be set to the main ContentManager. So now we can use CM in this method without having to pass a variable through here. And the reason I don't want to do that is because the reason I'm creating this method here, this function, is so that I don't have to type as much, and because I'm gonna have to call add texture for every single texture that's in my game. So I want it to be pretty short. I'm actually gonna change this from, yeah, that'll be fine. So the way this works is you'll do load and then less than texture 2D greater than, and that's telling that's telling it what type of variable it's loading the file into. And then file, and then what I'm going to do with the name, I'll go ahead and set what it does if name is nothing. We'll have textures.add. I'm just going to use, if you don't set anything, this basically makes it an optional parameter, and if you don't actually fill in the name parameter, the name will just be nothing. It'll be an empty string. So this says if name is an empty string, then it's going to use the file name as the actual name of the texture. So anytime if say I were to do, and you don't use the you don't put the extension, the file extension, when you load files in XNA. If say I were to do this, and then later over here I wanted to access that sprite, I would do textures and then like that, and that's how I would access it. It's giving me an error because I'm not doing anything. It's just I'm just getting the I'm getting a texture 2D, but I'm not doing anything with it, so it's giving me an error. But if I'm going to set a name for it, we'll call it Mario 1. So now name is Mario 1. This is Mario 1. So I'm going to say else if name doesn't equal an empty string. Now it added it to the dictionary with the name Mario 1, and that's how I would access it. Okay, so there's my ContentManager class. It's not done, obviously. There's some more stuff I have to do for adding sounds for one. Also, I'm only loading one texture, so every time I add a texture, I'm going to have to go in here and add the texture to my class. There may be a better way to do that, but that's the easiest way for this. There won't be a ton of textures. So where load content is where I actually want all of that to happen. So all I got to do is I got to go here, get my instance, and then I got to say load textures, and I got to pass it the ContentManager class. And that's done now. So at this point in the game, this texture gets loaded, and I can access that texture. Now, I'm going to go ahead and run it just to make sure everything's going okay. I should just get a blue screen. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to actually, just to make sure it loaded that texture correctly, I'm going to actually just draw that by itself. So it automatically creates a sprite batch class for you in the template, which I'm gonna use that because there's no reason to not. So the way you draw sprites, you have to have a sprite batch. You start with sprite batch begin, and then you end with sprite batch end, and that's how it draws stuff. So now I want to draw that Mario texture to the screen. So I'm gonna do sprite batch dot draw, and it's asking for a texture 2D. And so the way I get my texture, I do ContentManager, get instance, textures, and then it's called Mario 1, I believe, yeah. And then it wants to know where to put it. I'm gonna give it a vector. Just gonna do just kind of in the middle. And then what the color does, it adds a hint, tint. Yeah, that's the word. T-I-N-T, tint to your image. So like if it's white, it will show up like normal. If I were to make this blue, then the picture would look blue. So let's see what that does. And there's our picture. Since the picture I downloaded, it didn't have transparent backgrounds, so it's gonna be white, but that's okay for now. So I'm not too worried about that. So yeah, that works just fine. So the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and create the my scene manager class in this video, and then that's going to actually be the end of this video. And then I will start actually working on the menu screen in the next video. So subscribe if you want to see that, if you want to keep following this tutorial series. So let me add another class here, and this is going to be ScreenManager. Now before I actually start doing anything, let's go back to my plan here. Actually, let me save this real quick. Mario plan. Okay. Before I actually start working on the scene manager class, I want to create this screen class. Why did I should probably call that screen manager. What did I call it? Yeah, I did. Let me rename this. Keep that uniform. Okay, before I need to create this screen class, because that's really what's going to be, that's going to be the majority of the screen manager. So let's create a new, should I put it in manager? Yeah, I'll just go and put it in here. I might move it later. I'll go ahead and put it in there since the screen manager is in there. So in the screen class, we'll go ahead and create our constructor. We're gonna need to call a draw function, because that's going to be, the screen manager is actually going to be handling a lot of the drawing, just not directly. It will be doing it through the actual screens. So we'll have, doesn't need to return anything, draw, and then we're going to pass this a sprite batch. Resolve, and I need to also add. So this is my menu screen and my game screen are going to be extended from the screen class, and they will be actually using this function right here. So I actually have to make that, I believe I have to make that I have to put a virtual tag in front of that, but I'll mess with that in the next video. So I think that's actually probably all I need for now in there. because I don't actually need very much in there. I just need to have a uniform class, so that you'll see here in my screen manager, I'm going to have, let's use an array list. Array lists are easy to work with. I have to use just regular system.collections. We'll have array list screens. And then initiate that array list. Now, in array list, you actually can have different types of objects in it, but if you do have different types of objects in it, that it becomes more complicated, because anytime I use, say I do screens.get, or I mean, that's how you get it. Say I do that. I don't know what that is unless I am making sure that I only put one type of object in the screen's array list. So if I didn't have this class to extend my menu screen and my game screen from, that would mean I would have two separate classes at least, maybe more if I have different screens that I have to add. So more than one type of type of object that's going to be getting added to this array list, which just makes my programming a lot more complicated later on and a lot harder to read. So it's a good idea to do, if you're going to have more than one type of thing in one array list, you really want to have all of those things extended from one class. Okay, so, and then the other thing we're going to have, we'll have screen, current screen. And then we'll have a draw function exactly the same as this one here. And this one, what's going to happen? Gotta resolve this. It's going to be taking the current screen and drawing it. So what we do, and then in our game one, we'll have let's go and declare our screen manager. And then screen manager equals new screen manager. Put that in the constructor. Actually, let's put that. No, yeah, I'll put that in the constructor. So in our draw function, get rid of this. We will do ScreenManager.draw and then pass the sprite batch through. So what's going to happen? All we have to do is set the current screen in our screen manager, and that's the screen that's going to be drawn to the screen. So it makes it pretty easy to have different screens and then switch between them. Later, if we want, I can implement some sort of transition between the screens, but I don't know if I will actually do that in this tutorial unless it's requested. So just so I can kind of show what this is, I'm going to do, let's create another folder for screens. That's where I'm going to put this. Move that to screens. And then I have to actually, in my screen manager, I think I'm going to have to use Super Mario Clone. Oh, I know why. This is no longer in managers. This is in screens. So now it doesn't know where this is. It's there. And I like to separate my my using classes that are actually in my project. I think it makes it easier to read, I think. So in here, let's create a temporary screen just for testing purposes. And this temporary screen is going to be extending, that's how you do it, screen. Hold on. No, that's not how you do that. Wait, no, that's not what I want. It's been a while since I've done this. Why is that not at all what I want? 3 ways to extend a class. Ah. Sorry about that. I was doing that wrong. And then I have a base. I don't believe there's anything in the constructor of screen. Did I not put the... No, I didn't. Okay. What the heck? Why is that getting mad? Oh. That doesn't go there. Okay. So we'll have our public, this is the constructor. And then basically this is a constructor of this. So if I have anything going on here, then this will call that, and then you'll pass whatever variables in there, what you need there. But I don't think I will actually have anything in there. This is my temporary screen. Let me make sure I need to override the draw function. But I think to do that, I have to put a virtual tag there. So I think, yeah, okay. Let's do this. I don't like having that. So that draws there, and then I don't need it to do that. So all I'm gonna do here is the exact same thing I did before to draw Mario. And I have to use this, my ContentManager class. No, new vector 2. I'll put it in a different spot just so you can see that it's actually something different. I'll show you what happens too if you use a tint. And now, in my ScreenManager class, I have to say screens.add new temp screen. And now I have that temp screen in there in my ScreenManager, and then I'm going to go ahead and here and set my current screen to screen 0, which is going to be the screen, and you have to typecast when you do that. but I can just set it to screen. I don't have to do temp screen because I won't have any. The only reason I have to do typecast out to temp screen rather than screen is if I put some method in here that I need to call that's not in here, but I'm not going to do that because then that defeats the purpose of having the screen class. The reason I have this is so that I can simply say screen here, and this will work for all of my different screens. So now what's going to happen, my screen manager is going to get initiated here, which is going to create a new temp screen, and it's going to set current screen to the new temp screen. When it does that, it creates this class, which when draw is called, it draws Mario tinted blue. And then when draw is called here, it calls the current screen and draws that. The current screen is temp screen. And my scene manager draw is here. My screen manager, excuse me. So that calls this. So I should have a blue Mario. Yeah, and there he is. And that I think will conclude this tutorial, this video. I will be trying to get the next video out quickly. It will come out even quicker if I get enough views or comments on this one. So let me know if there's anything else that you'd like me to explain in more detail, or something that I could do to improve this series, as this is actually my first tutorial series to do. So anyways, thank you for watching, and I hope this helped you out a little bit. And please be sure to check back for the next videos in the series.